they set fighter jets against the Apache pilot, then heard her laugh before their aircraft exploded one Apache helicopter against 6 Fenrir fighters. 30 seconds. That's all it will take. The enemy pilot's voice dripped arrogance over the radio, but instead of fear, what came back was a laugh, low, cold, and fearless, a laugh that didn't belong to prey. Meet Major Elena Havoc Kane, 30 years old, black hair pulled tight beneath her helmet, green eyes sharp as glass, her logbook 3,600 combat hours in skies no sane pilot wanted. She flew the AH-64E Apache Guardian for the 11th Combat Aviation Brigade. But inside the unit, her reputation wasn't attack pilot. It was hunter. A pilot who bent the rules of air combat until even fighter jocks admitted the impossible an Apache could stalk jets. To the outside world, she was just another officer. To those who had fought beside her, Elena Kane was the pilot you called when everything was burning and no one else was coming. Her call sign Havoc was whispered from Kasria to the Corinth Desert, wherever she flew. The battlefield bent to her will. That edge didn't come from manuals. It started years earlier with her father, Colonel Marcus Kane, a tactical theorist who believed helicopters could be more than escorts. He died in the Corinth Desert conflict 9 years ago, but before he fell, he drilled his daughter with an unorthodox creed. Everyone thinks helicopters are sitting ducks. That's their weakness. But the bird that fights back, that's the one they never see coming. While other teens hung out at malls, Elena was in battered trainers, practicing terrain masking, ambush climbs, and snap reversals. She learned to think in 3 dimensions, to read enemy flight paths like body language. Her father taught her fighter pilots are trained to fight what they know, so give them what they don't. The aviation world mocked Marcus Kane's theories, impractical, suicidal, but Elena carried them like scripture. At West Point, she graduated with honors in aerospace engineering, already wired differently. While others memorized procedures, she rewrote them. She studied missile envelopes, fighter blind spots, and the limits of rotorcraft in simulators. The laughter stopped. Elena pushed Apaches beyond limits, climbing to altitudes no one dared, pulling maneuvers meant for jets, experimenting with impossible weapon angles. Each trial was rehearsal for a day no one believed would come when her Apache would face fighters head-on. That day had arrived over Darkan Valley, with 6 Fenrir F-31s closing in, and the world was about to learn why they called her Havoc. 6 Fenrir fighters scrambled, 8 American operators pinned, and Major Elena Havoc Kane, the only one in the sky. She had deployed to the Khazarian Highlands during the Iron Dagger campaign, flying support for ground forces under constant threat of enemy aircraft and radar. Most Apache pilots refused to fly without escorts. Havoc Kane did the opposite, volunteering for solo missions deep in hostile airspace. Her tactical planning was so unorthodox that even senior officers admitted she didn't just fly the Apache, she rewrote what it could be. Her call sign hadn't come from routine strikes, but from an impossible duel on her first deployment. A Marine patrol had been ambushed by armor. Elena destroyed the column with hellfires. Then 2 hostile rotorcraft arrived, true air hunters. She downed both using maneuvers no helicopter pilot had ever attempted. One F-16 pilot's report summed it up. She doesn't fly that Apache, she hunts with it. Before we push deeper into Havoc Kane's story, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing this community stretch across the world. And if you want more untold military stories like this one, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss the next mission. Some branded her reckless. Others whispered she was rewriting doctrine itself. That reputation put her in Darkan Valley the night Shadow Team went dark. What began as routine overwatch for 8 Tier 1 operators. Call sign Shadow 7 turned into betrayal. A local informant exposed them, and suddenly they were facing 20-to-1 odds. Worse intelligence confirmed enemy Fenrirs and Drakons had launched to intercept any rescue, pinned against rock. Shadow Team fought desperately. Overlord's voice cracked in her headset. Reaper 1. Multiple enemy aircraft inbound. RTB immediately. That's an order. Elena checked her display. 2 men already down. Ammo nearly gone. Allied fighters were 20 minutes out. In 20 minutes, Shadow Team would be dead or captured. Negative. Overlord, I have Americans in contact. I'm not abandoning them. Her fingers hovered over the panel. 20 Hellfires, 6 Viper Stingers, 1,500 rounds of 30mm cannon, against fighters. Most called those useless. But Elena carried her father's Creed fighter pilots die when they faced the unexpected. Ground chatter was chaos. Shadow 7 actual 2 men down. We're out of grenades. They're closing in 15 minutes left. Maybe less. Her radar lit up 6 hostile signatures, slicing through the night in perfect formation. Smug with confidence. Elena smiled thinly inside her helmet. They thought the Apache was prey, but in her hands, it had always been a predator. 6 fighters closed in. 1 Apache climbed higher than it ever should, and Havoc Kane whispered into the radio, "Let's see who's really hunting who." The Fenrir F-31s and Drakon S-42s swept into formation. Blades of steel against the black sky. They flew with the swagger of pilots who had never faced real opposition, precision perfect, trained to kill ground targets or slow-moving helicopters with ease. The enemy flight leader's voice rang clear over open comms. "Target acquired, Sector 7. Easy kill. Form up for gun runs." But what none of them knew, what only Elena's father had drilled into her soul, was that textbook tactics are a coffin when your opponent refuses to play by the book. She pulled the Apache to 8,000 feet, an altitude no attack helicopter had business flying. The rotors strained, sensors screamed. But this was the battleground she chose. Her father's words echoed, "When outnumbered and outgunned." The only weapon you have is surprise. Force them to fight your fight, not theirs. The enemy commander mocked over the net 1 Apache against 6 fighters. "This will be over in 30 seconds. That's when Elena pressed her transmit key. Her voice cut through the static. Calm. Almost conversational. "Gentlemen, you just made a very big mistake." And then she laughed, a cold, deliberate laugh that crawled under their skin. The psychological war had begun. The enemy expected panic. They got confidence. They expected retreat. They got defiance. The first Fenrir F-31 dove fast, banking into a gun pass at blistering speed exactly as Elena predicted. But instead of hovering low, she was hidden behind a jagged ridge that masked her heat signature. At the last moment, the Apache surged up from behind cover. 2 Hellfire missiles screamed across the sky. The fighter disintegrated before its pilot even processed what had happened. Flight leader down a panicked voice shrieked across the radio. Chaos followed. Their perfect formation wavered, cohesion bleeding into fear. They had prepared for prey. What they found was a predator. Elena was already repositioning, her rotors chopping the night as she vanished into the folds of the valley. 2 Drakon S-42s attempted a textbook pincer maneuver, bracketing her position from opposite sides, standard fighter doctrine. But Elena had studied these plays her entire life. She knew exactly where their blind spots lay. As the first Drakon entered attack profile, she yanked the Apache into a brutal dive, sliding beneath its belly. 1 Viper Stinger roared upward, slamming into its exhaust. The aircraft erupted, fire carving across the night. The second Drakon panicked, pulling into an evasive roll exactly where she knew he would go. She was waiting. Gun pipper locked. Another Stinger hissed skyward, detonating in a white-hot blossom. 2 kills in under a minute. The impossible had become reality. on the open frequency. Disbelief cracked through the enemy commander's voice. "This is impossible. A helicopter cannot defeat fighters." Elena keyed her mic once more. This time her laugh was colder. Sharper, apparently. Nobody told me that. 3 down, 3 to go. And the night was far from over. 3 fighters already burning, 3 still hunting. And Major Elena Havoc Kane whispered into her mic, "Let's end this." The sky was no longer theirs. What had begun as a flawless formation of Fenrir F-31s and Drakon S-42s was now fractured, flying defensively, trying to find a threat they couldn't define. Doctrine had abandoned them, and Elena knew it. Hesitation in the air was fatal. One Fenrir broke off, slipping behind her at 6 o'clock for a classic high-speed pass. By the manual. It was the perfect kill shot. But Havoc had been tracking him from the moment he rolled in, instead of fleeing. She snapped the Apache into a brutal swing turn, dragging her nose across the canyon wall, the fighter. Too fast to adjust, overshot sliding right into her cannon cone. The 30mm chain gun roared, spitting armor-piercing rounds that shredded canopy and engine. The Fenrir came apart mid-sky, debris raining into the valley below. 4 down, Elena announced, voice like steel. "Who's next?" The last 2 fighters circled above, pilots fighting panic more than the helicopter beneath them. Doctrine told them to stay high, use speed and altitude, but nothing in their training prepared them for an Apache turning the canyon into a kill box. A Drakon S-42 tried long-range engagement, loosing twin missiles from altitude for any other helicopter. It would have been instant death. But Elena had studied missile envelopes her entire life. She dumped chaff, dropped altitude hard, and hugged the valley wall so close the rotors almost kissed stone. The missiles streaked past, fooled into empty air. And then she did what no manual ever taught, used the smoke trails like arrows back to their source. A hellfire fired on max range. The Drakon never had time to evade. The explosion lit up the ridgeline, scattering wreckage across Darkan Valley. Now only one remained. Another Fenrir, circling high, its pilot frozen between fight and flight. Elena's voice crackled on the open channel, calm and merciless. "Last chance. Run or join your friends." The Fenrir wavered, then banked hard for home. Fleeing at max throttle. Elena didn't pursue. Her mission wasn't to collect kills, it was to keep Shadow Team alive. She switched channels. "Overlord. This is Havoc. Airspace is clear, moving to provide close support for almost 30 seconds. Silence. Then the commander's voice returned. Disbelieving Havoc. "Confirm." "Did you just down 5 enemy fighters?" "Confirmed," Elena said evenly. 5 down. 1 ran. Shadow Team is safe, with the skies hers alone. Elena poured precision fire into enemy armor and troop positions, carving a corridor for the pinned operators. Shadow 7 broke contact, dragging their wounded toward extraction. What had begun as certain annihilation had become survival because one Apache pilot refused to yield. 3 hours later, when she finally returned to base, the entire flight line was waiting. Pilots from every branch, every service stood shoulder to shoulder, staring at the woman who had done the impossible. They weren't just looking at a survivor. They were looking at the pilot who had rewritten the rules of air combat. The battle was over. But what Major Elena Havoc Kane left behind would change war itself. By the time her Apache touched down, the entire line of pilots was waiting. Men and women from every branch fighter wings, drone squadrons, even transport crews stood shoulder to shoulder, staring at the gunship that had shredded 6 fighters. Colonel Ramirez stepped forward first. His face carried awe and disbelief in equal measure. "Major Kane, what you did tonight should have been impossible. How does a helicopter defeat fighters? Elena pulled off her helmet, damp hair clinging to her temples, green eyes still burning with adrenaline. Her reply was simple. Almost sharp, sir. Everyone assumes helicopters are defenseless. That assumption made them vulnerable. Beside Ramirez. Captain Hayes, a fighter jock with 200 combat sorties, just shook his head. 8 years in fighters, and I've never seen anything like it. Where did you learn those moves? Elena reached into her flight suit, touching the faded photo of Colonel Marcus Kane, her father. From someone who taught me the most dangerous enemy is the one you never expect. Within hours. Her after-action report was stamped classified. Analysts pulled it apart, stunned that an Apache had been used as an air superiority platform, what they first called a fluke. They soon recognized as doctrine in the making. 2 weeks later, orders came reassignment to the Army's most secret aviation program, the Experimental Attack Battalion. Colonel Ramirez handed her the file. What you proved in Darkan Valley rewrote how we think about helicopters in contested skies. We want you to train others to build what doesn't exist yet. Elena studied the page. Voice low. Sir, I thought I was just a helicopter pilot. Ramirez smiled, shaking his head. After what you've done, you're not just anything. You're the architect of a new kind of warfare. 6 months later, she wore the rank of Major and commanded the first unit in history designed to train attack helicopter pilots for air-to-air combat. Her students didn't just learn to fly, they learned to think like fighter pilots while exploiting every strength of rotary wing flight. Havoc Kane's battle in Darkan Valley became required study, a case that shattered assumptions and opened doctrine no one had dared to write before. And in every briefing room, Elena passed down the same lesson Marcus Kane had given her when they tell you it's impossible. What they mean is they've never seen it done. Because innovation isn't born from following limits, it's born from breaking them. That night, 6 enemy fighters expected to find prey hiding in the canyon. Instead, they found a predator who rewrote the rules of aerial combat. And somewhere, someone